Welcome back to 2030, where we track the science shaping our future. In recent years, monk fruit has emerged as one of the most talked about natural sweeteners, showing up in everything from protein bars to soft drinks. But its story goes back centuries to the hills of southern China, where it was first used in traditional medicine. In this episode, we explore how monk fruit made the leap from ancient remedy to modern sugar substitute. We'll look at how it's grown, how it's processed, what the science really says, and where it might be headed next.
Okay, picture this. Mist-covered mountains deep in southern China. Centuries back, Buddhist monks are tending this really rare treasured fruit. They knew it was incredibly sweet, sure, but they also valued it for these hidden healing powers. And that story, that ancient legend, it's actually the start of something huge that's changing how we sweeten things today.
It's a fascinating story. Let's get into it.
Today, we are getting into monk fruit. And it's not just about a zero-calorie sweetener. It's a whole story culture, cutting-edge science, and honestly, a great example of how breakthroughs are shaping our future.
Our mission, as always, is to dig into our source materials, pull out the really key stuff,
And basically give you a shortcut to knowing what's what with this pretty intriguing fruit.
It really is a perfect example, isn't it? You've got this ancient tradition bumping right up against very modern science. That mix makes monk fruit, well, a really rich subject. We'll look at the history, the chemistry, yeah, but also, crucially, how scientific innovation keeps redefining something as basic as our food.
All right, let's start with that history, that mystique.
Yeah.
It begins with the name Luohangguo. Comes from those misty mountains in southern China, monks cultivating it maybe as far back as the 13th century.
And the name itself, Luohangguo, translates to the fruit of the enlightened ones, which is a direct nod to those Buddhist monks, the arhats, who apparently first figured out its amazing sweetness and medicinal uses. They brewed it into teas, tonics.
Yeah, and you still see that today, right? Brands totally leverage that origin story, peace, purity, ancient wisdom, all that.
Absolutely. And its place in traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, is pretty specific. It's seen as a cooling agent used to counter what TCM calls heat. Think inflammation, fever, that sort of thing.
It's like for coughs and colds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Primarily respiratory stuff.
Yeah.
Coughs, sore throats, lung congestion, phlegm. It acts as an expectorant, helps moisten the lungs. Now, some stories say 2,000 years of use, but the solid records, they point back maybe 300 years. It's mentioned in the Ming Dynasty Benkao Gangmu. And the Chinese Ministry of Health gives it this special status, medicine food homology, which basically means they recognize it officially as both medicine and food. Pretty unique.
And it really only grows in one specific spot, right?
Yes, pretty much over 90% of the world's commercial supply still comes from the Guangxi province, especially around Guilin in Yangfu County.
Wow.
Yeah, it needs that unique microclimate, shade, warmth, that constant mist.
And isn't that the area known for people living really long lives? The longevity fruit connection?
That's the one. Yangfu is famous for its high number of centenarians. So yeah, that nickname longevity fruit definitely adds to the whole health appeal and mystique.
So it was a local secret for ages. How did it get discovered by the West?
Well, its journey to global awareness really started picking up steam in the 20th century. Botanist Frederick Coville saw it in D.C. back in 1917. That got people like Professor G.W. Groff interested. But the real key moment, a National Geographic Society expedition in the 1930s. They specifically went looking for it in its natural habitat.
Ah, National Geographic.
Exactly, and that's why its scientific name is Serratia grosvenori, named after Gilbert Hovey Grosvenor, who was the president of National Geographic then.
Okay, so that expedition really put it on the map, scientifically speaking.
It did more than that. It was the spark. It showed the world, hey, maybe this idea of a plant-based zero-calorie sweetener isn't just fantasy. It sort of paved the way for everything that came next, all the science and innovation in our food supply.
Okay, so from monks and mountains to, well, the lab bench. Let's get into the science, because how does this fruit do it? How is it so sweet with no sugar?
Okay, tell me more.
First off, botanically, Serratia grosvenori, it's a vine, okay? But here's the wild part. It's in the gourd family.
Melons, squash, pumpkins.
Seriously, that seems so random.
It does, but it's significant because gourds, they often produce bitter stuff. But what's amazing is that the chemical backbone of those bitter compounds is actually similar to monk fruit's sweet compounds. Which brings us to the magroside miracle. Monk fruit's sweetness isn't from fructose or glucose like in other fruits. It's from these unique antioxidant compounds called magrosides.
Mogrosides.
Okay.
Think of them like a core sweet molecule called mogrel with some sugar units attached, like little tags. But here's the key. Your body doesn't absorb them in the upper gut like regular sugar.
Ah, so that's why 0 calories.
Exactly. They mostly pass through to the colon, where your gut microbes deal with them. So when they extract it industrially, getting rid of the fruit's actual natural sugars is crucial for that calorie-free claim. And there aren't even that many mogrosides in the fruit itself, maybe 2.5 to 3.8% in the dried fruit. So you need really good extraction.
And within those mogrosides, there's one main player, right? Mogroside V.
Yeah, that's the star, mogroside V. And it's the most abundant sweet one. In the ripe fruit, it makes up 0.5 to 1.3% of the dry weight.
So that's what the percentages on the packaging mean, like 7% or 55% mogroside V.
Precisely. It's the quality benchmark. Higher percentage means it's sweeter, tastes cleaner, less of that sort of melon rind note you can sometimes get. It's lighter in color. And yeah, it costs more. More fruit, more processing needed.
Interesting. And I read something about unripe fruit being bitter.
Yeah, the tale of two tastes. Unripe fruits have bitter mogrosides, like mogroside 3V. But as it ripens, enzymes in the fruit actually add more sugar units onto those bitter precursors. It's like the fruit has its own little sweetening factory inside,
Wow.
turning bitter into sweet, which means harvest time is absolutely critical. You want to pick them about 75 to 90 days after pollination to get the maximum sweetness and quality.
Okay, so we know how it's sweet, but just how sweet are we talking?
We are talking seriously sweet. Monk fruit extract is typically rated somewhere between 100 and 300 times sweeter than table sugar.
100 to 300 times.
Yeah, it varies. A lower purity extract, say 7% mogroside V, might be around 20 times sweeter, but get up to 50% mogroside V, and you're looking at maybe 240 times sweeter. And some individual compounds like cyamenoside 1, which also contributes to the sweetness, that can be over 500, maybe up to 563 times sweeter than sugar. It's incredibly potent.
Okay, mind blown a little bit. So
Yeah.
how do they get it from that vine in Guangxi to, the little packet in my kitchen? What's that industrial journey like?
Well, it's changed a lot. Traditionally, they used to slow roast the fruit for days, like 5 to 7 days.
Right, you mentioned that gives it that dark, smoky taste you find in herbal shops.
Exactly. But the modern stuff, the golden monk fruit, that uses low temperature vacuum drying under 50 Celsius.
Ah, gentler.
Much gentler, preserves the natural golden color, gets rid of those off notes, probably keeps more nutrients like vitamin C2. It costs more, it's more delicate, but the end product is much cleaner tasting.
Okay, so after drying, how do they get the powder?
It's a multi-step extraction. First, cut the fruit, remove seeds, skins, crush it up. Then infuse it with hot water, usually around 80 Celsius. Basically, brew a really sweet tea.
Okay.
Then comes filtration. Get rid of the solids. More advanced methods use ultrafiltration to take out bigger molecules, like proteins and pectins.
Right.
And finally, concentrate that filtered juice and spray dry it into the fine powder that becomes the raw ingredient for sweeteners.
And this is where more science comes in to refine it further.
Absolutely. Purification is key. A big tool is macroporous resins. Think of them as sophisticated sponges or filters.
Okay.
The crude extract flows through columns packed with these resins, and they selectively grab onto the mogrosides, letting other stuff pass through. Then you wash the mogrosides off with ethanol and water. Very efficient for large scale.
Clever. Any other methods?
Yeah, there's ultrasonic extraction too, using high-intensity sound waves to help break open the plant cells. It can improve efficiency. And sometimes you can even use cold water, which is seen as a greener method, better for preserving delicate compounds. And research is always ongoing. People are looking at novel materials like special silica gels that could potentially pull out specific mogrosides like mogroside V even more selectively. Imagine purifying it from 35% to over 76% in just one step. That's the kind of process optimization science is driving.
So if this stuff is hundreds of times sweeter than sugar, you only need a tiny bit. How does that work for baking, where sugar adds bulk and texture?
Yes. The bulking imperative. That's a huge challenge. You can't just swap sugar for pure monk fruit extract teaspoon for teaspoon. Your cake would be tiny and probably taste weird.
Right.
So what manufacturers do is blend the potent monk fruit extract with bulking agents. Erythritol, that zero-calorie sugar alcohol, is the most common one you'll see.
Okay, I've seen that on labels.
Yeah. Or they might use inulin, which is a fiber, or allulose, that's a rare sugar that actually helps with browning, which is important for baking. Sometimes even dextrose or maltodextrin, those add calories.
So the blend tries to mimic sugar's functions, not just the sweetness.
Exactly. Structure, moisture, that Maillard reaction for browning. It's all about getting closer to what sugar does in a recipe. It's a big focus for food science right now, making these replacements work seamlessly.
And who are the big companies driving this market?
Well, Procter & Gamble had a surprisingly early key patent in '95 for removing off flavors that really helped unlock the commercial side.
P&G.
Yeah, but the major player today is probably Monk Fruit Corp, also known as Gielan GFS. They're vertically integrated control things from farm to extract. They got the first patents for commercial extracts, pioneered the high purity stuff, first FDA GRS status. They partner with Tate & Lyle for global distribution.
Okay. Any major competitors?
Lane Natural Ingredients is another big one. They claim to be the largest producer, actually, and focus a lot on developing new fruit varieties through their agricultural programs.
And then we see the brands on the shelf, Lakanto, Splenda using it, Monk Fruit in the raw.
Exactly. Those are the consumer-facing brands bringing these formulated products to market.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Health. Safety regulation. The big question for many people. Blood sugar. What's the deal there?
That's one of monk fruit's biggest selling points. It has effectively zero impact on blood sugar, glycemic index of 0.
Because the magrosides aren't carbs.
Right. Your body doesn't metabolize them like sugar or carbohydrates. And the science backs this up. A recent systematic review, 2024, in Nutrients confirmed it reduces those post-meal glucose and insulin spikes compared to sugar.
So definitely suitable for diabetics or people managing blood sugar.
Absolutely. That's a key market for sure.
What about other health benefits? You hear about antioxidants, anti-inflammatory properties.
There's definitely research there, drawing on its traditional uses, lots of in vitro. So lab dish studies and animal studies suggest magrosides do have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. Some early lab research even points to potential anti-cancer activity against certain cells.
There's always a but with these things, isn't there?
Well, yeah, the crucial caveat is that most of this is preclinical. We don't have the large-scale, long-term human clinical trials to say definitively, yes, monk fruit extract prevents disease X or Y in humans. The potential is interesting, driven by the chemistry, but it's not clinically proven for those broader health outcomes yet. Science is still exploring that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's important context. Now, the regulatory side seems messy.
Yeah.
Especially comparing the U.S. and Europe.
It is quite different, yeah. In the U.S., monk fruit extract has been GRAS generally recognized as safe since 2010.
Which isn't quite FDA approval, right? It's more like the FDA saying, okay, we don't object to the manufacturer's safety conclusion.
Exactly. It's based on expert consensus and available data, allowing it onto the market relatively quickly. But then you look at the European Union.
Not approved there.
Not as a food additive, specifically as a sweetener, no. The European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, looked at it in 2019 and basically said, we need more data.
What were their concerns?
They cited insufficient toxicity data overall, some worries about metabolites, what the magrosides break down into possibly being genotoxic, some adverse effects seen in rat tests at high doses, and just a lack of long-term chronic toxicity and carcinogenicity studies.
So a much higher bar for approval.
A fundamentally different approach. It's not necessarily saying the science is contradictory, but it reflects different regulatory philosophies. The U.S. system prioritizes market access based on reasonable certainty of safety, while the EU takes a much more precautionary pre-market approval stance requiring exhaustive data up front.
And that difference really impacts what you can buy depending on where you live. It's a clear case of how science gets interpreted and applied differently.
Absolutely. It shapes the entire market.
But didn't something just happen in the UK?
Ah, yes. Very recently, June 2024, the UK's Food Standards Agency made a significant ruling. They decided that monk fruit decoctions, basically simple water infusions, the traditional way of using it, not the concentrated extracts, are not a novel food.
Because people used them before 1997.
Exactly. They found evidence of consumption before the novel food regulations came into effect, so those traditional forms can now be sold in the UK. And it kind of implies they might not be novel in the EU either, though that's still playing out. It potentially creates this split market, traditional infusions, but okay, high purity extracts, maybe not yet in the EU.
Fascinating. And elsewhere, Canada, Australia.
Approved in many places, over 60 countries. They often point to its history of use in China and the U.S. GRAS status.
Okay, looking forward then. Why does monk fruit continue to appeal so much in today's diets?
Well, it ticks a lot of boxes. Perfect for keto, paleo, low carb, because 0 carbs, 0 calories, great for diabetes management.
And just the general wellness trend, right?
Yeah.
Natural, plant-based, clean label.
Totally. It fits that perfectly for people trying to cut sugar but avoid things that sound artificial.
And you mentioned the science is still evolving on the product side. Better blends, maybe?
Definitely. Improving formulations is ongoing. Think better bulking agents, like using allulose to get better browning in baked goods, trying to replicate sugar's function more closely.
Any other tricks?
There's research into using enzymes to tweak the magrosides themselves, maybe attaching extra glucose units to improve the taste profile, make it even more sugar-like, reduce any lingering aftertaste, and just convenience expanding beyond powders into ready-to-use liquid extract syrups, making it easier for people to incorporate. Science isn't just about the core ingredient, it's about making it work better in our food.
How does it stack up against its main rival, stevia?
Ah, the sweetener showdown. Stevia's been around longer, so awareness is higher. Maybe 40–60% of people know stevia versus only 15–20% for monk fruit.
But monk fruit wins on natural perception.
Big time. Something like 77% see monk fruit as natural compared to less than half for stevia, which often gets lumped in with artificial sweeteners, even though it's plant-derived too.
And taste. That seems to be monk fruit's ace.
Generally, yes. It's considered cleaner, milder, less of an aftertaste. Stevia can have that bitter, sometimes metallic or licorice-like finish that some people really dislike.
Plus, the name monk fruit just sounds nicer. Healthier, maybe?
The branding is definitely strong. Monk suggests purity, wisdom. Fruit suggests natural, healthy. It's arguably much more appealing than stevia, or the technical term steviol glycosides.
So the market's growing fast.
Very fast. Projections are all over the place, but generally showing strong KJR compound annual growth rate anywhere from 4.5% up to 16%. We could be talking an $800 million market or more by the early 2030s.
Wow. Mostly in North America.
The largest market now, yeah. But fastest growth expected in Asia Pacific, close to the source in China, and it's moving beyond just beverages into dairy, baking, sweets, supplements. Demand is definitely rising.
Okay, but let's not gloss over the complexities. The unsweetened truth, as the outline calls it. What are some issues?
Well, there's the purity issue you touched on with bulking agents. Retail products are often mostly filler erythritol, allulose with maybe less than 1% actual monk fruit extract.
Which feels a bit misleading if the package just says monk fruit sweetener.
It can be. And the actual magroside V percentage, which tells you the potency of that tiny amount, is often missing from labels. Consumer groups and even the Sugar Association have pushed for clearer labeling.
And the whole natural debate again.
Yeah, that paradox. Marketed as this simple, natural fruit, but it goes through quite a bit of processing. Hot water extraction, filtration, purification with resins, spray drying. It raises the question, what does natural really mean when it involves that much industrial processing? Same debate happens with stevia.
Are there ethical concerns too, given its origins?
Definitely. Commercializing a fruit so tied to TCM and Buddhist culture by primarily Western companies raises valid questions about cultural appropriation. And are the farmers in Granji seeing fair benefits from this global boom?
So pressure on companies for ethical sourcing.
Absolutely. Traceability, fair trade practices, sustainability. These are becoming increasingly important for the big players to demonstrate.
Okay, this has been a whirlwind tour.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the future and something potentially disruptive.
Yes. This is where it gets really exciting from a science and future of food perspective. The biotech frontier, meaning moving beyond the farm. Traditional agriculture has limits, right? Low yield per fruit, that very specific growing region, risk of crop failure, high cost.
So grow in the lab instead.
Essentially, yes. The goal is to produce pure magrosides using fermentation, totally separate from the actual monk fruit plant.
How?
Scientists have now mapped the entire genetic pathway, figured out all the plant genes responsible for making the key enzymes that build magroside V.
Okay.
And the really groundbreaking step is metabolic engineering in yeast. They're taking those monk fruit genes and inserting them into ordinary baker's yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae.
Reprogramming the yeast?
Exactly, turning the yeast into a tiny biological factory that churns out pure magrosides, starting from simple sugars. They've already achieved what's called de novo synthesis, making these complex sweet molecules from scratch inside the yeast. We're talking actual magroside V produced in a bioreactor.
That is incredible. So monk fruit sweetness without the fruit.
Precisely. And it's not just yeast. Others are working on engineering other plants, like cucumbers or tomatoes, to produce magrosides.
What's the potential impact?
Huge. Potentially much cheaper, a more stable and reliable supply, scalable, and completely independent of geography or climate. Biotech companies like Elo Life Systems are aiming to launch these fermentation-derived mogricides as soon as 2026.
Wow, that really is science shaping the future of our food. But it also blows up the whole natural fruit image, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That's the massive question it poses. How do consumers feel about a sweetener traditionally from a fruit now made by engineered yeast in a tank? It challenges everything.
So what a journey. From a 13th century monk's tea in China to a multi-million-dollar global sweetener, and now maybe heading towards biotech production.
It really encapsulates that paradox. Ancient wisdom providing the inspiration, but modern science delivering it at scale, with all the processing and now potentially biotech involved.
And that central tension isn't going away.
Yeah.
The market relies on the natural halo, but the reality is complex processing, ethical questions, patchy regulation.
Right. And now this massive fork in the road ahead.
Yeah, this race for the future. Is it about refining agriculture, better plants, sustainable farms?
Yeah.
Or does biotech just completely change the game, making the fruit itself almost irrelevant for the sweetener?
And if it's biotech, that shift from plant to fermenter,
Yeah,
it fundamentally forces us to reconsider what natural even means in our food system.
it really does. So as science keeps rewriting the rules of our food supply, how will you, the listener, navigate this? How do you weigh tradition versus technology? And what does natural mean to you in your own search for a healthier way to live?
What really stands out to you from this episode of Signal 2030? See you next time.
Thanks for joining us.